Hey you all, Carpetbagger here, coming to you live from the north, more specifically Braddock, Pennsylvania, and I'm outside of the United States Steel Mill here in Braddock. And there's something I wanted to see here, something that I had previously not heard of. Now, I'm fascinated with like tall tales and American legends. You're about Paul Bunyan, the ultimate lumberjack, Johnny Appleseed, who wandered the land planting apple trees, Pecos Bill, the ultimate cowboy. But I heard of a legend that I had never heard of before, and that is Joe Magarack. And here outside of the steel mill have a statue of Joe Magarack. Now apparently Joe was the ultimate steel worker. He allegedly would work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, maybe Joe should maybe take a day off. That does seem a bit excessive, even for an American legend. See his big feet down there. Now they say that the legends vary on his size. Some say he was 7 feet tall. Others say he was the height of a smokestack. Now, even though he generally worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, he would take minor breaks to rescue other steel workers. If there was some sort of industrial accident, some sort of collapse, Joe Magarack would swoop to the rescue and save his fellow steel workers. Now, apparently, one of the reasons Joe was so comfortable working in a steel mill is because he was made of steel himself. Apparently, he was born in an iron mine, and he was raised inside of a burning furnace. And for lunch, he would actually drink molten steel as if it were soup. You can see the way he's bending that iron bar with his bare hands. Apparently, he wouldn't use any tools while working in steel. He would just stick his hands in the iron vats and steel it. He would form railroad beams just with his fingers like it was Play-Doh. Now, even though he was massively strong, he also had a big heart. The owner of the mill wanted to find an ideal husband for his daughter, so he held a weightlifting competition to determine who would be able to take his daughter's hand in marriage. And of course, Joe Magarack won because he was a giant steel man and everyone else was just a human. But Joe, instead of taking the boss's hand in marriage, he allowed her to step away and marry her true love. Now, there's controversy on whether or not Joe Magarack is still alive or if he is deceased. One story says that he threw himself into a forge and allowed himself to be melted because they were short on steel, and his body lives in different buildings and bridges around the country. But some say that he's still alive and waiting in an abandoned steel mill, just waiting for the furnace to be refired. So let's spread the word on Joe Magarack. I think he deserves a place in folklore right along Paul Bunyan, Johnny Appleseed, and Pecos Bill. And we have landed in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, home of one of the worst disasters in American history. I'm talking about the 1889 Johnstown Flood. See, there was a private dam, a private reservoir outside of town, actually owned by a local country club. It was privately owned. Allegedly, the rich folks used this area as a recreation area, the reservoir. And there was allegations that they were not taking care of the dam, not updating it, not taking dam maintenance serious. Always take dam maintenance serious. But what occurred was the reservoir swelled the dam burst and a wall of water went wiping through the valley, knocking out several towns, picking up debris along the way, creating a big wall of not just water but debris. Actually hit a barbed wire factory, causing all the debris to be wrapped up in barbed wire. So a giant 60-foot tall wave of broken wood and barbed wire went plowing through the town and killed, I think it was 2,200 people, which at the time was the worst singular disaster in American history. Killed the most people. The record would be broken, I think it was 11 years later, with a hurricane in Galveston, Texas, and then after that the record would again be broken during the 9/11 attacks. So here in the middle of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, we have the Johnstown Flood Museum, and look at what an amazing building that was. That was actually a library donated by the Carnegie family because they felt bad about the flood, but it has been converted into a museum to commemorate the flood. You can see the plaque there. It says it was originally the Johnstown Public Library, rebuilt and enlarged and improved by Andrew Carnegie, 1891, just 2 years after the flood. And now there's the Flood Museum. It's an interactive map that kind of shows you what happened. 11:30 a.m. Johnstown is born. You can see the reservoir there, ominously glowing. Uh-oh. See the water flooding through the valley there. Oh man. You can see this valley almost perfectly set up to have a catastrophic flood. 4:07 p.m. Johnstown is hit. See the entire city being hit with water. Saying that the wreckage actually caught on fire once hitting Johnstown. This is the South Fork and Hunting Club, the wealthy people that are sometimes seen as the villains of the story, the wealthy individuals who use the reservoir to fish and hunt but failed to maintain the dam. Here's an interesting relic. That is a taxidermied frog fishing in a frame. The frame says South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club. So, little taxidermied frog there. It's a relic of their club. This is saying this touch display is closed. I'm saying that sanitizing them using the cleaners over and over can actually damage the screens. Here's a souvenir from the flood. It's a bottle of flood water collected by Mrs. John Monroe. It says that people actually came to the town as a tourist attraction to see the devastation of the flood, and I guess they would take their bottles of flood water home with them. Here's some artifacts that were recovered from the flood. This pitcher here, spoon, clothing, a quilt. There's a quilt that survived the Johnstown flood. There's a chair, some photo albums. Here's the flag that was flying in the town day of the flood. This back wall of the museum is kind of a recreation of the giant wall of destruction that the flood pushed through Johnstown. You see all the different pieces of wood and trees and barbed wire and crashing through the town. Even a train. We picked up train cars and pushed them through the town as projectiles. Here's the journal from a doctor that worked to help all the hundreds of people injured in the flood. There's his doctor equipment right there. Now, bad enough to have to go through a flood and then having to work on you with one of these metal catheters. The sign here says that this was once a piece of a steel railing bridge, and you can just see it has absolutely been twisted like a piece of spaghetti. Some different relics from the flood. That jar there, almost a piece of folk art. It's different little pieces of things recovered from the flood. Probably the most unusual thing is this lock of hair right here. It says that a man was, I guess, helping recover bodies from the flood. He found a woman in, the wreckage, recovered a body, and just decided to keep a lock of her hair. I guess she was never identified. This quilt here was being sewn by a group of women. One of the women died in the flood on her way home after a sewing session, but her friends completed the quilt. Apparently the flood was mentioned in a issue of the Archie comic. And then here's a comic here where all the people that died in the flood are showing up in heaven. And he says, before you talk about your experience during the Johnstown Flood, you should know that Noah is an audience. It's a weird comic. This list right here on the wall is every person that died in the flood. Notice something very interesting up there on the side of that mountain. There is actually a train track that can transport cars to the top of the mountain. There's like little railroad cars that you can pull your vehicle into, and it will transport you all the way to the top there. That was made in response to the flood to try to get things to higher ground. I'd really love to ride my car up there. Unfortunately, they're closed today. Now, one really interesting thing about the Johnstown Flood is it really changed the American legal system. See, because the dam was neglected by the Hunting and Fishing Club, it caused the dam to collapse and the water to destroy entire towns. But no one that died, no one that had their property destroyed was able to get any compensation from the Hunting and Fishing Club. There was multiple legal cases, but the Hunting and Fishing Club got off scot-free, and that led to some re-examination of American law. And now the way it stands now is that there's much more responsibility on people to take care of things, to maintain things, to create a safe environment that you can be sued because you have neglected something, or you sued because you did, like you go into a business and then there's something dangerous in there that hurts you, that you can be sued for that. And all that is because of how the victims of the Johnstown Flood were kind of screwed over by not getting any money. Now, there's actually a second Johnstown Flood museum at the other end of by where the old dam that actually collapsed used to be. So we're gonna head over there. Now here we are at the National Park Service Johnstown Flood National Memorial, and the lake that caused the massive flood used to be down here, held in by an earthen dam, but as you can see, there's no more lake because the entire lake moved to Johnstown. Step inside the visitor center here. Here's the old lake that used to be here. We are standing right there, right by where the dam gave way. To show the devastation of the flood, you can see they've replicated it here, having this tree and a house bursting through the walls here. And there's this poor gentleman just hanging on for dear life. This guy over here is actually Victor Heiser, who survived the flood by holding onto the roof of his family's barn and riding it down the river of wreckage. And then Dr. Heiser would actually become an infectious disease doctor, would work on smallpox, malaria, and other infectious diseases. We could use a man like him today, I'd say. The downstairs level, we get a different perspective of the massive wall of destruction. Hang in there, Dr. Heiser. There's another simulation. So we press here to start.
The rain began on the afternoon of Memorial Day, May 30th, 1889. At 2:45 p.m., Johnstown received the last of 3 telegraph warnings. The dam is becoming dangerous and may possibly go. A giant wave of water, a rolling ball with the force of Niagara Falls, roared down the Conemaugh Valley. The flood had become a grinding mass of timbers, trees, rocks, and rails. Houses, bridges, and railroad cars moved with it. The wave moved faster at the top than at the bottom, continually rolling over itself and crushing anything beneath. Boiling black steam and added rolls of barbed wire to the monstrous flood. The wave surged back, created a vicious whirlpool, and lodged houses, people, and animals against the stone bridge.
The National Park Service says to stay 6 feet apart, which is the length of a mule. This house right here, in the Unger house, actually where the manager of the fishing and hunting club lived, that was responsible for the lake down there. As you can see, not much left of the lake. You can just see a tiny, tiny little creek. So thank you for joining me today as we travel across Pennsylvania, learn a little bit about the Johnstown Flood, one of the most horrific events in American history. I guess you almost don't hear about it a lot, but like I said, the 3rd most deadly occurrence in the United States of America definitely deserves more attention. And just the thought, the horror of a 65-foot wall of broken limbs, railroad cars, and barbed wire ripping through a town and then setting fire, and it's just awful. There's a terrible, terrible, awful occurrence. But anyways, I appreciate you guys joining me. If you'd like to see other places I've been, check the interactive map in the description of this video. If you'd like to help support the channel, consider donating to Patreon. $3 or more will get you a postcard once a month. There's other ways to contribute as well. All that information is in the description of this video. Until next time, this one's in the bag.